Good evening, fellow viewers and fellow Africans at home and abroad. My name is Capo Daniel. Welcome to the No Crony Talk Zone. Today is Sunday, and it's another day where they commemorate the D-Day landing, the Normandy landing in Europe, which led to the liberation of France. Today, I've come today to you to talk about what it means to us as Africans. This day, as the Europeans and the Americans, the Canadians, the Norwegians, the Australians, they commemorate 77 years after the Normandy landing in France, where over 20,000 troops, most of them in their teens, 18 years old, 19 years old, 21 years old, Americans and young Europeans landed on the shores of France at Normandy to liberate France from German occupation. It was a bloody war, indeed a bloody war. I want to take this episode to explain to our people how does this matter to them, to all the African people who are going through oppression, those who are going through dictatorship, being governed by leaders, dictators that do not represent their interests, and they have no say in who govern those countries, like countries like the Republic of Cameroon, Uganda, and many other dictatorships around Africa. Please, you are highly welcome to this show. As this show will be broadcast on the ACN network, I want to greet everybody who have opened their door to allow me, open their TV to allow me to speak to them today. I also want to greet those who are going to watch me on Facebook and on YouTube, especially those in the diaspora and the population back home in the Amazonia, and those Biafran people who are indeed going through subjugation in this era. Welcome to this show. As I said, I speak Pidgin English. That is my preferred language, and I'm going to speak English as much as I can, but my English is based on Pidgin. So forgive me for the grammar and focus on the subject matter, because that is actually what matters to us today. They used to say, my people die because of lack of knowledge. Indeed, we as Africans, we suffer a lot because of lack of knowledge. If you do not know your right, it is almost impossible for you to access your right. If you do not know your right, it is impossible for anybody to respect or give you your right. We as Africans, we must learn our history. We must learn the war order and how it connects to our history for us as a people to be able to tap into the international system for our rights to be respected at home and abroad. Today, in this show, this is a show where we speak the truth and nothing but the truth to our people, to make sure they understand what is at stake, and they are empowered with the knowledge that will lead them to free themselves. My name is Capo Daniel once more. Sense Pasque. Welcome to this show. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have been watching TV of late, you'll be hearing the celebration of the D-Day. The D-Day was, the name of that operation was called Operation Neptune, where the Americans finally joined the Second World War, partnering with their allied forces to launch an attack against German occupation of Europe. At that moment, the Germans have occupied France, and they had attacked the Soviet Union. They were attacking Great Britain, and the British people, the French people, they came together with Americans and all their allies from Australia, New Zealand, across the globe to launch this D-Day operation that eventually defeated the German Empire and liberated France and much of Western Europe as we see today. This battle was very, very important for human development. It was very, very crucial for the establishment of the war order under the United Nations and the Declaration of Human Rights. It all started with the Allied Agreement that took place in the Atlantic Charter that finally recognized the rights of the people. This was the battle of good against evil, where the whole world for the first time come together to get into battle for a specific reason, to accomplish a specific goal. I'm going to explain to you how this thing happened. If you watch the TV, if you watch CNN, you watch Fox News, you will see this day being commemorated across the globe. Little will you know that this day is so important to Africans, and Africans played a pivotal role in this battle. In terms of military sacrifices, the people of Africa actually suffered the highest casualties in this war. So I'm going to talk to you about how this event of the D-Day, the Neptune Operation, why it matters to us as Africans, and in particular to the Amazonian people and the Biafran people who are all fighting for the right of their people for self-determination. This is very, very important. This operation was the largest ever amphibious landing operation that have been conducted in the history of mankind. And it took place with about active participants. You had over 22,000 British troops that landed on the shores of France. In total, you had over 350,000 troops that took part in these operations. In fighting the Allied forces, it had about 350,000 active troops that took part, both infantry and navy. What you don't hear is that the troops that came from Africa amounted over 400,000 troops, primarily from Senegal and Algeria, Tunisia. The French recruited troops all over their 14 territories in Africa. So I'm about to tell you this history and to make the connection so that you are empowered with the knowledge on how these things concern you. So this operation that took place in France, I think I'll put up some of the pictures of the commemoration of this day in America. So the D-Day landing, or the Neptune Operation, that is being celebrated across the world as the Normandy landing. It's a day now, it's over 77 years. It's a day where veterans of the Second World War memorial, they come in, they greet each other, they go back and they relive that landing, which they call the longest day of their life. A lot of young men, a lot of teenagers died fighting for the liberation of France. They were fighting for the soul of mankind. They were fighting for a common goal. This battle took place in 1944. But before this battle started, I'll take you through the history so that you know exactly why they were fighting and why they succeeded to bring together the Allied that defeated the Germans. Among the people that fought this battle, which you will not see on TV, are the African Americans. The African Americans who fought for this battle. Let me bring up the pictures. Yeah, these are the African Americans who took part in this battle. You also have a lot of Africans who fought in these battles, primarily from Senegal, Tunisia, as I've said earlier. I want to put up their pictures so that you can see the Africans that fought to liberate France and Western Europe. These are not stories that have been told. And more important is not just this battle, but it was why they fought this battle and how the world came together to challenge German, and why it is being considered the fight for humanity, the fight for democracy, and the fight for human survival. So this battle, the theater where this battle was staged, for the Europeans, it was in the Mediterranean, in areas that were controlled by the British. That is where they gathered forces to attack the German Empire that had occupied a huge part of Europe and was attacking the Soviet Union. You also had in North Africa, where the French primarily were gathering troops. They had recruited troops across Africa. The total number of African troops that participated were 400,000 African men that took guns to partake in that war. Amongst them were one of the father of the Amazonian Liberation War, Dr. Cho Ayaba. Yes, from Ambazonia, his father was one of those troops that fought to liberate Western Europe from German occupation. At this moment, the first country that was being targeted for liberation is France. You would imagine France, that today is one of the greatest undermining of African sovereignty. The greatest new colonialist master was the first country that the Europeans decided to liberate. For you to understand why they went into this war in 1944, you have to understand the reason why they went into this war. When this war was going on, you had Winston Churchill and the President of America, then Franklin Roosevelt, who made the Allied meetings, what they call the Allied meetings, where they gather and really decide a post-World War II future. What would the world look like after World War II? This was the whole design before the Americans decided to get into that war and fight. And they actually got into that war 3 years after, because they made this agreement in 1941 and they joined the war in 1944. So they had the first meeting in what they call the St. James Palace meeting in June 1941, where the Americans and the United Kingdom came together and agreed on certain principles which are fundamental to us as Africans. They realized, they agreed that every people, every nation have equal rights, and it is not possible for people to continue to colonize other countries because you are strong. Because the German colonization, annexation and occupation of Europe make them to realize that no country have that right to colonize another country. Just like the Americans has realized that all human beings were born equal before God, they also came to the realization that all states and all nations are equal. And there is no way you occupy another country and live in peace or keep justice for peace to ever exist. So they had that agreement in St. James Palace, and then later on they met the Soviet Union in July the next month, and they had an agreement which they call the Anglo-Soviet Agreement. The Anglo-Soviet Agreement, it was the base on which the Atlantic Charter, the next month, which was August, was signed, where you had Franklin Roosevelt, the American president, meeting with Winston Churchill to now bring all this agreement, this understanding into what they call the Atlantic Charter. And the Atlantic Charter became later on the basis for the United Nations Declaration. So these are fundamentals in the war order. The realization that once a people develop into a country with a single system of government, single system of lawmaking, currency, economy, once they have this identity, it is no longer possible for you to take it away from them, no matter what you do. So they decided on certain points, 3 main points, in which the war peace will rely upon, in which will make them to bring the world together, all the allies, to fight against the Germans. They did not just come and fight against the Germans. It didn't just happen like that. They fought for a goal. There was a uniting principle that brought these countries together. The first was that there should be no territorial aggrandizement. That means no country should desire to occupy or expand into another country. It should be forbidden. It was agreed at that stage. The second point was there should be no territorial changes without the determination of the indigenes of that land. You should not change any territory without the concern or against the will of the people of that territory. These are very important principles that they agreed. That was a common goal that they agreed before they could get into that war. And the third, that there should be a restoration of self-governance on all territories. That means every territory that have evolved to develop this characteristic of a system of government, system of legislature, a national flag, a national identity, currency, should have the right to govern themselves. Those were the guiding principle. You also had the free trade and freedom of navigation and all those things, about 12 of them. But these were the principle that brought the Allied forces together to confront the Germans, to tell them, you do not have the right to get into France. You do not have the right to colonize England, even if you have the power, even if you have the strength. So the whole world decided to fight against this evil. And today, we are still seeing the same thing going on in Africa. So it's very important that we understand the reason why these people went to fight in Normandy. It's very, very important. This was the basis of the people's right. This was the birth of the people's right, written in the Atlantic Charter, that guarantees that the war should intervene whenever these cardinal principles are being violated, as they were being violated by the Germans. And for over 2 years, the Allies were waiting. Americans should come and join us to fight and kick the Germans out of our territories. And the Africans came. The French recruited over 400,000 Africans to engage in the battle to liberate Europe. The Chinese also was fighting, because they were fighting against the Japanese, to liberate China from Japan occupation. It was agreed that no country should occupy another country by force. No country should assume sovereignty of another country by force. There should be no territorial changes without the consent or against the will and the wish of people indigenous to those territories. The world had agreed and committed to defend those principles, to fight against those principles. And it was on those bases that the United Nations was formed. Ladies and gentlemen, today we see in Africa, in Amazonia, in Biafra, and in many other places, how those laws were kept aside. Not only did our territory being violated on this principle, but the young Africans who went to fight to liberate Europe, over 400,000 upon them, were abandoned, were forgotten. And in France, the Africans that took part in liberating France were kept away from the celebration of the victory against the Germans. They were kept away. Today, the same thing. You do not hear or you do not see the color of black when they celebrate the invasion of Normandy. You do not see them. According to one magazine that was published, a newspaper Guardian page that was published last year, the writer states that black soldiers were expendables, then forgettable. Yes, we were expendable and we are forgettable. All the black soldiers that were used to fight to liberate Western Europe, were actually more than the whites. You had over 400,000 blacks that were Africans that were recruited to liberate Europe. They were slaughtered, they were killed, and they were refused the right to celebrate the victory. Today, African states, African territories do not enjoy the same protection offered by this Atlantic Charter and the United Nations. The partition of Africa along the victory lines did not recognize this same right of the people to Africans. The white people, the British, came to Nigeria, where you had 3 states coexisting properly. The eastern states of Nigeria having their own legislature. They came with the whole idea of divide and rule, amalgamation. that violates this principle upon which they had their freedom, principle upon which the Americans joined them to fight and defeat German occupation. Then they came to Africa. All the states that were developed, they started to do divide and rule, violate all of our states' rights. And France today have finally recognized their rule in perpetrating the genocide that took place in Rwanda. And the French government, while they are apologizing in Rwanda, they are perpetrating and supporting, covering up for dictator Paul Biya, who is perpetrating another genocide in Amazonia. What a shame. What a shame. What I want you to know is that Emmanuel Macron, who went to France. I'll show you first the pictures. These are memorials from France. These are French memorial of young men of French origin who fought and died to liberate France and Europe. You go to America, is it how they call that beach? Omaha Beach in America. You see cemetery of their young men who fought and died to liberate Europe for the sake of democracy and the preservation of the people's right, so that the people of Europe can enjoy freedom to govern themselves, freedom to decide upon their future. And today they don't want to give that same right. They will not stand up and defend those rights when it comes to African states or African people. The French country, the French state, which was the first state to be liberated, not by the French people alone, but by the Allied forces, is today the major player in perpetrating the undermining of African sovereignty and people's rights. We have seen the French government supporting a coup d'etat in Chad, while lobbying African government to condemn a coup d'etat in Mali that is highly supported by the people of Mali, which is meant to preserve that country in the hands of Malians. This hypocrisy should stop. And now, us as Africans, we have to recognize and understand the gamble that is going on. We have seen the French government dispatching Emmanuel Macron to go to Africa and undermine the ECO, the single currency that was promised to be established in West Africa. You would imagine that Africans will be wise on the French manipulation by now. But no, we were more happy to see the president of Ghana challenging and speaking in the fluent, assimilated way to Emmanuel Macron, forgetting to know that Emmanuel Macron is there on a mission to destroy the ECO. They carried the ECO and hand it to a puppet in Ivory Coast. Today, where is the single currency in Africa? The French have completely destroyed it. The African people are rising in Mali, they are rising in Chad, and we have hope. But without knowledge, our people will still perish. Any gains will be reversed. We have to understand that the Chinese will not allow America to come into its sphere of influence. But in Africa, we allow them to come and manipulate. They even pay our bills in the African Union. And we expect them to respect us. They will use our own people to give them small prestige. You find African leaders happy to sanction Chad and cut it off from the protection of ECOWAS. Mali, but they will not do the same thing for Chad. You think it's normal? Wise up, Africans. Wise up, Biafrans. Wise up, Amazonians. I want you to remember who the French are. We have seen Emmanuel Macron going to celebrate Napoleon Bonaparte. Let me bring up the image. Unfortunately, technical difficulties is hard for me to get those images. Let me get those images of the French. This is the memorial of Emmanuel Macron going to visit and celebrate Napoleon Bonaparte. And they make all type of excuses that Napoleon Bonaparte was a national hero for France. It's like the Germans celebrating Adolf Hitler, that he was a good strategist, military strategist. There is no excuse. We have to know that in this era of Black Lives Matter, when you see Emmanuel Macron getting away to commemorate a genocider called Napoleon Bonaparte, the person who restored slavery, and Emmanuel Macron giving him credit that without Napoleon Bonaparte, France will not be the way it is. It's the same thing Charles de Gaulle did to us in Africa. And François Mitterrand continued the same thing, saying without Africa, France will not survive. These are people who have not abandoned the idea that we blacks are disponible. We don't deserve the same rights as the Western people deserve. We have to understand. We have to understand our self-worth. We have to understand our expectation from the international community. Because if you don't know your right, you cannot even ask for your right. Your right will not be respected. This is Emmanuel Macron. This is the face of France, honoring Napoleon Bonaparte in the era of Black Lives Matter. And where are the black voices? They are all silent. In case you don't know, the French government is the only country that reinstituted slavery in 1794. That was after the period of what the Europeans call the period of enlightenment. That means they had already evolved to recognize the human rights and the nature of humanity. That is why slavery was banned in the first place. But the French government reinstituted slavery for close to 100 years thanks to Napoleon Bonaparte. And in Haiti, where the French people instituted slavery, the lifespan for black people in Haiti was 5 years. That means when they arrest slaves and they take them to Haiti, they walk you out until you die. They close their mouth with chains so that they will not be able to eat sugar cane in the farm. This is the real face of France. The colonizers, the genociders. We as a people, we must understand this denial of our nature by the French, this denial of our right of sovereignty by the French. We must understand the French government, Emmanuel Macron, is busy doing everything to keep us Africans where we are, unable to govern ourselves, our territories, unable to unite as a continent. This is what the French are actively doing because they benefit directly from those policies. We have to understand that the Atlantic Charter that was signed, let me bring up the page, the picture. Unfortunately, the picture is not available. I can't see it in my phone. But we as Africans, we have to understand that the Atlantic Charter, the United Nations, is built on this principle that there should be no territorial aggrandizement. No country should have the right and the power to occupy another country. No territory should be united or expand without the will or against the will of the people of those territories. Today, in Ambazonia, the French Cameroon government, a member of the United Nations, which charter clearly states that no state party should expand its border as it was obtained during its independence without entering into a union treaty. It is clear law. The Cameroon government have annexed, recolonized the British Southern Cameroons, which we call Ambazonia, in violation of this cardinal principle. There is a cover-up going on by France, which is benefiting from our petroleum. Our people have to know that the Cameroon presence in Ambazonia is illegal. It's wrong. It tramples the right of our people. You cannot sell something you do not have. So no matter what back deal the British people have, they have no right and they can't sell Ambazonia because it do not belong to them in the first place. This is purely black on black recolonization. The same with the Biafran people. They have to understand that the principle that set the war orders forbids the British people to create the amalgamation of what they call today Nigeria. It is a flagrant violation of the St. James Palace Agreement, of the Anglo-Soviet Agreement, of the Atlantic Charter, for the British government to have violated the right of the people to change the form of their states, dividing the eastern region into several states in order to neutralize their exercise of their right of governance, to protect their economic interests in favor of the British people, using the Fulani people in tribalism, classic divide and rule, to govern and manage Nigeria. We as a people will have no dignity without our right to self-govern, without our right to self-determine the political outlook of our territories. We must remember that the freedom we see today in Europe was not given to them on a plate. The freedom we see, this is a memorial even in France. This is a memorial in France of French young men, teenagers, who died sacrificing their life so that France can be free and Europe will be free. Today they are perpetrating the same slavery upon us. We, the youth of Africa, we must rise up to defend our honor, to fight for our right, to exert our right, and we must know our right. We are calling on all the people, indigenous people of Africa, the people of the various states of Africa, who have had a sense of identity, a sense of nationality, to not think that they are bewitched, or what they feel as a sense of nationality is something illegal, wrong, terrorism, or secession. No. It is legitimate right, it's legitimate aspiration that we must pursue. Freedom will not be given. There is nothing like you walk into your future, you step into your future. The future is made today. The freedom we see in France, the United States, in China, was not given to them. Their leaders sat down, come to an agreement in St. James Palace in June 1941, and agreed with the Soviet Union in the Anglo-Saxon Agreement, in the Soviet Anglo-Saxon Agreement in July 1941. And later on, the President of United Kingdom and the United States, they came together and had an agreement and came out with a point description of what they want, a vision of a post-war war. What do they want the war to look like? They wanted a war of freedom of movement, freedom of trade, freedom where people can rule themselves through democracy. They envision it, and for 2 years they plan on how to make that future. Today we have seen the leader Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, with the leader of Ambazonian War of Liberation, Dr. Choluka Sayaba, who have come together to agree on respecting the people's rights of the Biafran people and the Ambazonian people and the people of all Africans to self-govern themselves, to write their own constitution, to determine the price of their raw materials, to develop their own technology. Because these things can only happen when the people govern themselves, when the states is there for the interest of the people and not to maintain a balance. We as African people, we can no longer continue to sit down and watch France in the name of so-called stabilization, allow our people to enjoy the peace of a graveyard, while their own children enjoy the peace and harmony of a state. We can no longer allow the disguise of the so-called democracy and elections that is being manipulated all over Africa to put in place French stooges to govern us for French interests. We have seen how Mr. Paul Biya in Cameroon even brought in French people to come and impersonate Transparency International in order to justify their election. And every time they make these fake elections, the French government will come and say, for the sake of stability, we will just criticize them and we stay quiet, and the people will be like that forever. We have seen in Uganda, the son of the president is now the general, controlling an entire army for his father. Is now a monarchy. We have seen the same thing in Chad, in Gabon, in Togo. We as Africans, we cannot be men of dignity if we cannot govern our own countries. If we cannot pay the ultimate price for our own freedom, we must fight. Bobby Wine must go to the bush. Otherwise, the madman of Uganda, the dinosaur, Museveni, will rule you from the grave. The people of French Cameroon, they must rise up against Paul Biya. Otherwise, the mad daughter of Paul Biya, Brenda Biya, will rule that country, and there will be nothing they can do. The people of Ambazonia have risen up. The people of Biafra are rising up. They understand the stakes, but they must understand and embrace the battle for freedom. We must accept the responsibility and invest and pick up the sticks that the French people picked up to challenge the Germans. It's a war against evil and good. The forces of evil have legitimized their constitution and hide themselves behind governments. They are no different from the slave masters. We must make sure we can have our dignity back and liberate our country. So, ladies and gentlemen, as the white people in America, New Zealand, Australia, they celebrate this day, the D-Day, the Normandy landing, we as Africans, we must remind ourselves that the rights that these people fought for are also African rights. Our states do matter. Our sovereignty do matter. Our dignity do matter. We must not wait for them to come and liberate us. They have failed us. They have no interest in doing so. We were the forgotten. We were the disponible. Only us can make ourselves not disponible, not forgettable. We must remember our own history. We must learn the history. We must understand the international system and know our enemies. We must know our competitor. The war is a brutal field of competition in economics. We are like in a football field, playing a football game, and we don't even know the rules. We do not even know that they can score us. How can you play a football game and they give you a team and you don't even know that when a ball gets into your net, it is a goal? So we play with them and they score us like 20 goals and cancel it, giving us forgiveness for debt. We must wise up. We have millions of Africans who are in the international system, working in high places in the United States, in the UK. We now know the truth. We must take it back home, just like our forefathers did. When they returned from the Second World War, they realized that the white people were not as invincible as they thought they were. They realized that they were not gods, and that we as African people, our own destiny is in our own hands. Thank you very much for watching me. I hope you'll be inspired, and I hope you take the primary responsibility for our future. We must create the future we want in Africa today. We should not expect miracles. We should gather, we should follow the leadership that there be, that are selfless, that have dedicated themselves and their life to liberate our people and empower them. It's time for the good in Africa to rise and win. God bless you all. Ciao.